high. So, to dig deeper into the fruitful river of messianism and its aspirations, its perfectionism. Perhaps since the ancient Greeks, the model we of the West insist upon, though we actually understand very little of, men, always men, we imagine, got together and pondered. How can we do this better? How can we fight better, build better, understand more, seek better, write, act, philosophize, etc.ize better? It's the sort of corporate fantasy when the bigwigs get together and ponder how then we imagine these aspirations were fueled and uniquely achieved by a very competitive society, each man striving to outdo his neighbor in achievement. Or should we say each rich, influential landowner, each member of the elite, hereditary elite, the messianic one, magically, genetically endowed with quality, or the merited elite, the one we imagine Athens to have invented, the one we are today, because Athens showed us how. However, we people, this community, it is not the only one that matters. It is the only one that matters. It is the community we have recorded behaviors, achievements, dietary habits, sex lives. They are history. No one thinks about Joseph the gunner on Francis Drake's third ship during the battle against the Spanish Armada as the winner of the war against Spain. The truth is, he is as good a deserver of that honor as anyone. But he doesn't work in the messianic imagination. The winner must be a descendant of a king, preferably David. Like the stories of boys in bulrushes, he was always special, just hidden by his simple, stolid, adoptive parents, a fascinating, nearly universal myth which makes our parental obsessions as relevant as sieves. What is it called? It doesn't matter. But I insist, the pyramids at Giza are not still there because of a genius architect, or slave driver, or pharaoh. They are still there because everyone who pushed the rock up the slope did his or her job that day. The cooks that fed the workers cooked well. The fishermen who caught the fish that the cooks cooked, that the workers ate, did well that day. This is what I believe. There are clearly people who will feel diminished by this way of reading history, people who've got huge student loans to aspire, to rise, no doubt pharaohs and architects who are invested in their elite value. They will at some point have found culturally sanctioned justifications for their delusions, their huge $500 million yachts, their afterlives, c'est la vie. It is cute and amusing, and at last laughable, but Alexander doth return to dust. We live in this grip. It has not diminished in several thousand years, and its faithful believers will tell you it is the nature of the human to operate this way, and every pharaoh knows. Every pharaoh knows it is invented and concocted BS. Every Ramses, every Elon, every Alexander, and every Jonathan the Gunner. We, however, we miserable many, we paparazzi, we journalists, we aspirers and PhDs, we livers in and commenters on, we climbers of the hills and ladders of life, we spinners of yarn and yarns, we believers and electors and participants, receivers of accolades and losers of prizes, we can accept all this as fact. Or open the door and go out into the night of the self. We can happily sit on the bus and imagine the person next to us is brimful of genius and rejoice, or be cowed by this. The cowards will reassure themselves in millions of ways that nobody on the bus is even close to I. Almost every facet of our lives is available for a price to assure, affirm, and confirm this specialness, our specialness. Mostly a voice hums between clenched teeth that we should not be on the bus, in fact, but the Audi is in the shop. The imagination of the racist is one of humanity's most extraordinary stretches. There is no fact, no science, no experience equal to the need that is racism. The need the racist is attending to in their unmade selves. It's so messianic. Its whole reality is owned by the racist. Nothing in existence supports its existence but his or her need of the knowledge, the assurance, sitting on that same bus next to that Kenyan because you could not find another seat, and all you are left with is that terrible existential need to feel better than. Without this feeling, existence is unbearable, and it is a battle you will lose. You have the Pharaoh disease. Did he ever or she ever look out the window at the teeming Egyptian street and think, oh my, we are all pharaohs? Never. The one thing America cannot do is imagine it is Iran, though essentially it is. It is Russia. In behavior exactly. Messianic. America's efforts are almost entirely devoted to its messianic otherness, just like Britain, all of Europe, and maybe even ancient Mesopotamia, but I cannot know. A documentary on the megalopolises of history claimed the Greek theater in Athens was the first ever. You have no idea. The myth seems to be that after 200,000 years of walking upright with opposable thumbs and big brains, theater began suddenly in 3,000 years ago. Even the paintings in southern France are date at 40,000. Bare-bone flutes are dated at 50,000. So were we just awaiting a Greek? Every democracy as the Greeks did it, looked mighty close to tribal behaviors all over Africa long before the Agora. The argument between Achilles and Agamemnon on a beach at Troy looks a lot like a good old dust-up between the rivals of Union Boston. This is all disconnected, except that the messianic cultures that came after wanted to claim famous precedents and rewrote the past to fit their new invention. The Greeks and Egyptians, as I see it, were not messianic. Nobody was awaited. There was no return, no once and future, no second coming, not even a first coming. Pharaoh was a god, king, or queen, already here and indisputable. Then there was a quick drop straight down from his or her family. Most people were way low down. The Greeks too, I think. Yuval Harari said it really well. History is what happened to the 1% while 99% tilled the fields. Waiting is a messianic thing, preparing, improving, obeying laws, eating some flesh, but not others, purifying, waiting on a supernatural kingdom, being promised a promised land, believing oneself part of a special, homogeneous community connected by family ties, just loose enough to not threaten inbreeding, etc. In ancient Egypt, aspiration was a humble proposition. This stasis is to us unbearable. What is life if one cannot rise? Quote, this is the first generation that won't do better than their parents. Oh no, oh no, so what? Most of the Egyptians our myths have made nasty would look like civil servants today, lobbyists or middle management, and they'd not be many, nor rich, not like today. They'd be worm tongues or Jafars, viziers to the mighty. But we have improved, insisted Thomas Jefferson. We can rise, we can aspire to untold wealth. That is our freedom. Messianics have modified all these characters and behaviors. The great leader, the prophet, the awaited one, would cleanse the world, the tribe, like some huge flood. The unclean eaters of forbidden fruits from trees of knowledge would be found and convicted, banished, allowed a chance at life, only through a life of penance, without wondering at the pointlessness of that. And there is always some reward for some deed performed or some penance so huge the rest will wonder at it. I've paid my dues. Why, some old man might even insist he remain in power despite failing cognitive ability, and his crew will say, well, at least he ain't Satan, the anti-Messiah. This is us. Variations are numerous, but not so various, as you will say. And apart from being boring, I have only one complaint, quibble really. What about the 99% messianism makes irrelevant? The masses. the 5,000, not because I care about them, feel pity or sympathy, want to lend my broad shoulder to them, but what about the fascinating selves they each are? I come from the Jafar class, you see, not the 1%, but the worldwide, very definitely in the 5%, and I know what my people do. They plot, scheme, rationalize, justify, philosophize, insist on compensation packages for themselves, tenures, 401ks, diversified stock portfolios. We are Pharaoh's assistants, basking in his reflected sun, spending his largesse. We are not slaves. We are not free, only freer than slaves. We are willing instruments of the Messiah. We are communists or capitalists, Catholics or Buddhists, all obeying something, jostling in its pews, joining its armies and murdering the children of our designated or slave or barbarian threat. The ones who do not share our Messiah, the ones who are free of him and who we hate, therefore. This 5% I have observed from within for 50 years. Imagine the 95% to be another life form who may every now and then hoist themselves by their lederhosen straps into university and learn to talk like us. I have finally figured out that I don't talk like us either. I talk like this. But my study, the objects of my fascination, are that great sea of life that just lives, that doesn't need to climb, to improve, pretend, aspire, worship on knees looking up. There is nothing up there.